Dr. Mark Changizi here with your Science Moment. What's the difference between censorship and memory holing? Now, you might think they're both the same, but there is actually some fundamental differences between them that I haven't even fully processed yet. But this all starts with a simple distinction in logic that we often use, and in linguistics it's a standard distinction. It's called use versus mention. It's the use-mention distinction. So if there's a particular word, a cup, for example, or pillow, let's just use it. I've got pillow right here. Pillow refers to pillows, so I'm using the word pillow. But the single quotes or double quotes, scare quotes around pillow doesn't refer to pillows at all. The mentioning of pillow, as opposed to using the word pillow, refers to the word pillow. So if you want to refer to the word pillow, you just put single or double quotes around it, depending on the etiquette of the publication. And now you're referring not to pillows at all, but you're referring to the word, the utterance, pillow. Now, there could be very few things in the universe more different than pillows and the word for pillow, which either in written form is a bunch of letters with ink or some kind of contrast differences on a computer or on a page, or uttered. It's a sequence of sounds that sound like nature in ways that I've just talked about in my earlier book, Harnessed. But however you want to talk about what the utterance of a pillow is, it's totally not like an actual pillow, right? So now that's a very fundamental distinction. It can sometimes lead to confusion if you're not careful, but it's also key in understanding the difference between mere censorship, of course, and most of the time I've been talking about censorship, versus memory holing. Now, in an earlier video, I can't remember where it was, probably in the 90s, I don't know, plus 100, moment number 100, plus or minus 10 or 15, I'm not sure. I was out in the park and I was talking about, and this was before I was permanently suspended from Twitter and eventually appealed and got back in, how Twitter is a way of me and many people storing my external memories. I create long threads with lots of information, each which links either to the information or links to other people's tweets that have the information that I want, or are themselves threads of lots of information themselves with synapses which go out elsewhere. My memory isn't here; it's in my bookshelves, and it's in various kinds of other places where I know that they are. And in the case of Twitter, I've created sort of threads that I spatially navigate, and I go, I don't know where this is, but I know that on this thread I can go part way down, and then I can navigate to the left, and I can head off over to this other thread. And I remember that here, if I take a right, so to speak, within these threads, I can find the information. These things harness our natural ability to spatially navigate. And what I complained about at the time was that one of the dangers of suspension, permanent suspension, is not just that you've lost that voice, and it's not just that you've lost his or her future tweets that they're going to say, nor are you just losing the tweets on their timeline of what he or she said. You're losing all of the times that other people quoted my tweets, as opposed to me, right? There's a lot of people who are retweeted me onto their timeline, or they linked to my tweet, or they quote tweeted me. Those are fundamentally different kinds of things. Getting rid of my voice and my specific tweets, my specific propositions, is in some sense censorship. But when you remove every time somebody talks or refers to what I said, this is more like a use-mention difference. So I might say, X is bad, and I'm censored, and I can no longer say X is bad. But suppose my tweet was there, and a lot of people had referred to my tweet, and so they have mentions, not uses. They're not actually using or making the actual proposition that X is bad. They said something along the lines of, hey, Mark thinks that X is bad. They're mentioning what I said. They're not themselves claiming it. So if you censor my claim that X is bad, that's a fundamentally different thing than censoring someone who says, Mark says, quote, X is bad. They haven't made a claim that X is bad. They've just made a claim that Mark said X is bad. It's the same use, mention, distinction. And so the kind of censorship that Twitter is in fact engaged in, and Facebook and these others, and it's much more relevant for Twitter because Twitter is much more interlocking and neural, and they all whereas Facebook is not nearly so web-like in this way. It's sort of got a different mojo going on, and Instagram is sort of even less web-like in that way. When you censor in the way that they do, it's not just all of my tweets that are gone and me that's gone, but all of the mentions of anything that I said is now gone. That's the difference between censorship and memory holding. And this is the difference. What makes memory holding, or at least the intuition, is that if you went into the history books, the very ideas, the very mentions that Doug said this particular thing, that X is bad, and Mark said this Y is good or whatever, those are not. They're all the mentions of those things are even gone. That is, when you mess with the ability to mention what other people say, what other expressions they say, you're messing with history itself. It's only via the history, in this case, it's a centrally controlled history within Twitter, but by removing all mentions, which is all tweets and all quote tweets and all retweets, you are messing with the entire history of what has occurred on Twitter. You are memory holding, not merely censoring. In fact, so you're no longer just censoring me, you're censoring everybody that retweeted me. You're censoring everybody that quote tweeted me. Because they are not, in fact, and you're censoring them for different reasons, because they aren't making the claims that I'm making. They're making historical / journalistic / just statements of fact about something that I said. They're making mentions. They're not actually using or making the same kinds of claims that I am. Each and every one of those people is being violated by that censorship, and everybody therefore is being violated because the historical records of what was said are being removed altogether. Now, in the real world outside of Twitter, this would be as if not only am I no longer allowed to say things in the New York Times, the government prevents me from saying those things, but so I'm no longer allowed to go out and speak about certain kinds of things, both in social media or in any other place, but any other records that are out there, any of the newspapers, that they have the ability to go clip, and they're all gone. All the mentions by newspapers and journalists and anybody else, it's all gone. And the nice thing, and this gets back to something we talked about relatively recently, this is one of the great things about regular old-fashioned publications, is that regular old-fashioned publications and magazines and newspapers are inherently decentralized, inherently distributed across the earth, and are almost impossible to memory hold, because no centralized controller knows where they all are. So this is a useful distinction to have in mind, and it's helpful to remind us and amplify the degree to which Twitter and the federal government is engaged in dangerous behavior when they're involved in censoring misinformation. This not only would be bad enough if they were censoring me and removing my stream, but they are not just doing that. They're removing and there are potentially hundreds of thousands of mentions of what I have said, and millions of mentions from all of the other people that have been permanently suspended. All of those mentions are gone. That is memory holding, and this is the most dangerous thing that you can do for an expressive network, and is exactly what is guaranteed now to blind us and blind our ability to move toward the truth. And that was your science moment.